we experienced it over the past 2 decades, changed the way we do business. But the Internet of Things, this is changing the industries at all. You have to ask yourself in the future, what industry are you in? And if you're thinking about confusion, and I think that's part of that. And at the end of the day, there will be the need for the brands that have the trust of the consumers to convey their story and claim their stake of the cake.
Well, it looks like lack of interoperability is one of the audience's perspectives, a major obstacle. What is the role of the platform vendor in overcoming some of these barriers?
I might actually challenge the question a little bit. I think this is a question that could have been posed 3 years ago. I think now we're actually seeing pretty healthy growth in the market, and we're seeing starting to get double digits of homes that have smart home technology in them, and I think we are seeing growth. You have to start to think about the smart home again is such a broad term. You have to kind of divide that category. So the places we're seeing growth are in areas where we have platforms that are connecting devices and service providers that are able to install and sell that and articulate the value prop. And so I think we're seeing very healthy growth in those service provider-driven channels, whether it be cable providers, security dealers. So I think that's actually really exciting to see. And so my takeaway from that is actually that there is consumer confusion, right? So it's still a consultative sale. Somebody has to help people understand. But also this technology is not a plug-and-play technology, right? It's not quite a retail product. And that will come. That's the sort of inevitability of this. But today, to me, that's the biggest barrier to growth. It's not easy for a consumer to do themselves. So once you get out of the early adopter market, people are either just don't know how to do it or have experienced massive frustration and give up. But I do think we're seeing dramatic growth in certain categories of smart home today.
Again, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just add maybe that I think interoperability is a problem, and I think that there's a number of ways you can solve that problem. I think people like platform providers are doing that today, where they're putting multiple technologies in to kind of bridge that gap and remove the confusion for end consumers. But I think the bigger picture, or what we see as the bigger picture problem, is that people are still not aware enough to know that these devices should work together. And like over the holidays, we saw a lot of people giving away Amazon Echoes or this or that connected device, but nobody said to me, well, how come I can't connect that to that? Like the use cases that people understand are still very simple use cases. They're not really understanding the value of putting it all together yet. And I think, again, platform providers and people in the market who are offering, more comprehensive connected home solutions can help educate the consumer that, hey, how come you didn't buy a thermostat? Maybe you should buy a thermostat because it's really easy to install and it connects into the system or a door lock. You can expand the use cases beyond that single use case that somebody may have purchased for. So I think it's just a general awareness for the value propositions that the connected home brings is one of the biggest challenges.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that at the end of the day, we all have a responsibility to collaborate together to continue to drive this market. There's a long way to go in terms of getting to that tipping point of consumer adoption. One of the initiatives that we have taken at SmartThings is to make sure that we're even looking at products that could be perceived as competitive. Take Amazon Echo as an example, and doing interesting integrations with Amazon Echo so that you can leverage that technology in your smart home on top of the SmartThings platform. So we intend to continue to do that and embrace those competitive products in the market, because we just feel like, for now, having an open platform that allows ease of integration and ease of adoption amongst consumers is key. And then down the road, we can look at what are those platforms that are going to dominate in the marketplace. It's going to be few than more. But at this point in time, it's too early, I think, to bet on a single platform for the consumer.
So, given the audience perspective here that lack of interoperability is one of the significant barriers to adoption, it seems like it's simply a competitive advantage, right? It's a value add that platform providers offer to consumers. But that's just one of many different opportunities in terms of value add that the platform provider offers. So I asked the audience to kind of weigh that connecting multiple products into a single user interface as one key value add, but there's several other value adds that the provider or platform provides. So if you could kind of give your perspective on maybe your things, what is the key value add for a platform? And as they answer that, I'd like to ask your perspective
dovetail and also a little bit on the last discussion. I don't want to rain on the parade, but I mean, I think it's actually potentially going to get slightly worse before it gets better, because we're really only seeing the big players get involved now, right? So Apple HomeKit is kind of, been getting sort of baked. It's getting further along. We're starting to see some HomeKit products come onto the market now. This week, Google got serious about announcing Weave, and Weave will essentially be a competitor to HomeKit. So, it's been confusing so far. Imagine now introducing the issue of the smart home into the equation. How is a device going to exist in a world where you've got households that have a mix, of Android-based phones, iPhones? I mean, that's actually going to make the problem even more complicated. So, I mean, I agree in the sense that the answers lie at the platform level and figuring out interoperability. And certainly, people who provide more of a service provider approach to the problem, I think, are clearly in the best position to resolve this. But nonetheless, with the introduction of the big sort of 800-pound gorillas in the space, I think the problem is going to even get more difficult.
Any other comments on the key value adds for platforms?
Well, I think that's really it. I think it's in trying to demystify that real difficult challenge. We sort of turned all consumers into IT people now, and most of us probably in this room are reasonably technical. Imagine the public at large trying to deal with some of these challenges that we collectively as an industry are imposing on them. So I think it's ultimately in the platform provider's interest really to take as much of that confusion out of the equation as possible. And of course, there's many techniques and tools involved with doing so. The other thing we haven't touched on at all is standardization. There are certainly standard offerings that are out there. I think that, like any new market, in sort of the rush to get things out there, there's been a lot of proprietary things that have been developed that doesn't really serve our interests. There are many competing technologies, even just at the radio level, protocol level. Eventually, those will converge, and there'll be fewer of those. So, I think the platform players have a role in demystifying and help resolving all of those. But it isn't going to happen overnight, I guess. My message.
Thank you.
And I think the unified user experience from an IT perspective is a real opportunity for a platform provider. Again, if you have so many apps for all of these connected things that are all independent, I think that increases the confusion in the marketplace. I think by unifying that together, I think that's really where the value add for platform provider can be. Will they all, like you said, Apple coming in and Google coming in and all these guys? I mean, I think there will be an increase in those unified user experiences until some of it flushes out. But I think it's a real opportunity because if we make it more complicated for users to try to connect these things in, they have to go to 12 different apps to connect their home. That creates more friction than it solves for.
So the audience says that the interoperability is going to be user interface. That's the key value add, but secondly, it's control algorithms. I'd like to ask the question again, but maybe thinking maybe 3 to 5 years down, as interoperability maybe becomes a little more practical from some of the other initiatives, say AllJoyn or OIC or some of these other platform approaches that provide interoperability. If that is a significant source of value add today, what will be the significant source of value add for platforms in the future?
I'll make a comment. I mean, I think that there's a the audience is super insightful here. So I think the paradigm right now is very clunky and simplistic. I have a device, and I, as a user who have a phone in my hand, are at the center of that universe. So I'm controlling things, and I actually think being able to control something is almost like a negative value proposition, right? You're making me do something more. It's more work now, right? I want less work in my life, and now you told me I got all these things I got to pay attention to, right? So I think Nest, I'll give a little nod to Nest on this one because I think they were very clever when they came out with the thermostat. If everybody recalls here, right? They didn't call it an IoT thermostat or even a connected thermostat. They called it a learning thermostat, right? So the idea, the marketing positioning at least around that, whatever the experience may have been from what was delivered, was that the device was at the center of the world. And the device itself was going to add value by getting smarter and adapting itself to our life as opposed to us adapting ourselves to the device around us. And I think that's the direction that we have to move. The intelligence is there. We don't have to cram a bunch of CPU cycles into the devices. The These are all cloud connected. We've got essentially infinite, compute and storage and bandwidth power in the cloud. That needs to be leveraged to make these devices a lot smarter. And ultimately, what we want is a really smart home that we don't have to be, proactively involved in order for it to be smart.
Right. I mean, when I look at sort of the platform, I think that's right. We actually do a lot of that today with broadband. So we have tens of millions of devices connected, millions of homes, and billions of data points. So we have data, we're doing things, and I think it's really, like, put simply, it's making the smart home useful, right? Like, the ability to use an app to turn on your light has so much utility. It's actually also a novelty. But the fact that my house can tell me how much energy I'm using, when my AC starts to need repair, when I can proactively do things, when I can do things like use voice control, use TV interfaces, use my app, automatically do everything based on my proximity and location, use all the sensors and data in the home to make things smarter. All of that exists today. I think what we see is as people experience that, they have declined usage of the app, and we're really moving beyond the app and the smart home, right? And it's more intuitive interfaces, and more things happening on your behalf instead of on your command. And I think that's a real exciting possibility for the value of the smart home, both to the individual, but to other interested parties like insurance companies or utilities or kind of other industries that get a lot of benefit out of integration of this technology. And I think ultimately the consumer benefits by that, by making the things more affordable to the point that they're almost free to get that technology in the home. And also it's the value and the benefit of that service.
Brian, I would like to add here, and basically it was the reason why we co-crafted the term smart home as a service. I think that, and I don't want to play down our efforts that we have to take in account in the years to come, but just imagine the future that the house will be, it will be smart in a sense, like Uber for the transportation industry, right? So you no longer think about where, call for a cab or what's the cab number, but it's about having a convenient temperature or having a sustainable house or having a secure house, being sure that you see on one side that everything is okay. So I think it's still a long way to go. We have to be clear about the end goal, that the house, it will be really a service. Housing will be a service. Living will be a service.
Brian, your thoughts just on the core question was the current value add for smart home platforms versus maybe the value add in a few years' time.
Yeah. So our focus has been, in 2015, it was how do we make sure that we get as many devices on the platform as possible so there's as much choice as possible for consumers to build the smart home that they wanted to build. Our focus over the last couple of months and through 2016 is really looking at point solutions where we can solve very specific problems for consumers and automate a lot of those functions. So we rolled out the first kit into the market called the Home Monitoring Kit that allows consumers to be able to create routines, good morning, goodbye, that automate a series of functions for them, whether it's turning the lights on, turning the lights off, turning the coffee machine on, turning the temperature up or down, locking all the doors when you leave, creating a very integrated and seamless experience, just like everybody's talking about. If we rely on the consumer to figure out what they want to do with their smart home and with the things in their smart home, what happens is you get this spike in terms of adoption, and then you see a precipitous drop in terms of long-term usage and engagement with their smart home platform. We're really focused on automated routines using smart apps in an app that help consumers visualize what are the things that they can automate today, not in the future. And we think that's pretty important in terms of the value add that can be delivered right now. And it's really one of our themes in 2016 is the smart home is here today. You could do very interesting automated things today. You don't actually have to wait until the future.
So we've been talking about the perspective of the platform and its value add, but let's talk about maybe from the manufacturer's perspective. So there's a lot of smart products out there, and what's the value for them to integrate with a platform like you? So if the audience could kind of give their perspective. I've offered a few choices here. You know, being a new channel to market for your service provider partners, differentiation, partnerships, improved user experience. There's a lot of different choices, a lot of different values that a manufacturer might see. How do you attract integration partners? And how do you attract manufacturers to integrate with your platforms?
I'll just say from our perspective, probably our #1 driving vision behind our platform is to sort of call us a platform. Meaning we don't really have a dog in the fight in terms of competing for the attention of the end customer. So we have everything is never a brand that the end customer will see. So we very much, I think one of the other panelists made this comment as well, we very much sit in the background. But that doesn't mean we're not doing something very valuable, because by connecting to our platform, we become essentially a jumping off point to participate in other ecosystems. And what I find is that's what manufacturers are really looking for, is because ecosystems represent market opportunity. They're channels to market, right? So if, for example, somebody has a home that is based around the SmartThings platform, right? If one of my customers wants to integrate into that, well, how do they do that? Well, if we're connected to our cloud, we happen to have a cloud-to-cloud integration with SmartThings. So you can take your SmartThings app and you can turn on the light that's connected to the Everything platform, because we've done that integration out of the box. So I think that's a spirit of cooperation that we're talking about. But what that does is it opens up more market for my customers, because now that's clearly an ecosystem that they can sell into. And there are a lot of ecosystems like that. So I think that's a really critical part of our strategy, at least, is to build in these connections, as sort of out-of-the-box API integrations with all the popular platforms out there to essentially open up as much of the market as possible to a manufacturer.
I think that, so, all those, the leading things, distribution, the ability to add enhanced value to a single product by integration to other things. I think an interesting thing that some manufacturers don't think about, but we see a lot of value in, is with the Alarm.com platform, since we go to market through service providers, we put a lot of effort and kind of engineering and innovation into how those products get installed and supported and maintained and updated over time. And so I think from a manufacturing perspective, with the right service provider, you actually get the benefit of reduced support. And so when, example is with a smart thermostat, you actually have the ability to remotely access, troubleshoot, and resolve issues on that thermostat instead of having to send someone to the house, right? So that creates a better user experience. It attracts service providers and it enhances the experience with that device, because people get to enjoy it as opposed to get the frustrations. We all know support and issues around IoT devices is something that is today really an issue.
And I think this is where the audience got it right. If you look at it, it's pretty overwhelming that at the end of the day, device manufacturers care about the experience that consumers are having with their product. And if they can make sure that they are certified and on a platform that is going to provide an amazing user experience, that's important to them because of the brand equity for their product. Let's not forget, most of these products are adjunct to non-connected products. That's their core business. The connected product business is an emerging business for them, and the last thing these manufacturers want to do is impugn their brand and their core business as they enter into this market. So I think that's #1. I think #2 is they do care about the channel opportunity, but I think what they really care about is the opportunity for their products to be used in the context of bigger solutions. So if you're a lighting manufacturer, the idea that you could actually be a part of a solution around monitoring or a solution around entertainment, multiple instantiations, if you will, of your product, that is particularly interesting to them, because for now, you walk into a Home Depot and you think of a light as a light. But if you get involved and you're a part of a platform and a routine involves the light in a lot of different ways for the consumer, you suddenly unlock a lot of value that consumers didn't perceive in your product prior to being a part of that platform.
So there's manufacturers have limited resources, and so there's a lot of different platforms here. Several are represented by this panel. I have to make a choice between Alarm.com and I control SmartThings. Yeah. So how do you make that choice? So there's a lot of engineering investment.
You need to connect.
Yeah. So help make your case, I guess.
But I want to add here that when we are launching now our ecosystem to really foster the integration, we not only talk about cloud-to-cloud integration, but we're offering fully in-app space in our applications. That means that a third-party manufacturer could deliver his device coming along with his app or with his applet and plug it directly into the ecosystem.
So maybe instead of making the case specifically instead of a sales pitch, how could they decide? What would you advise in terms of figuring out what's best for them?
I'm going to not do the blame pitch. We have data sheets on our website, and welcome you to take a look at them. We obviously believe what we have, but I'll offer this, right, which is that I think the one thing that people forget about is scale. And the reason why is because that's not the problem that's in front of you, right? When you're building something, when you're in that phase, your mindset is around the launch date. That's the way product people think, is I've got to be in market on this date because that's when you're in the consumer, retail world, that's when the resets happen, et cetera. So that drives your whole mind. And that's great. If you make that, that's really, really cool. But what happens if that product is really successful, right? And the volumes ramp up in thousands, tens, hundreds of thousands. I think what people are not doing enough due diligence around is how that platform is going to behave at scale. They see it working in a demo with a few things connected, and it's a big thumbs up. But don't make that mistake because computer science doesn't work that way, right? And I will tell you this, that when you have a problem with scale, those problems do not manifest themselves in a graceful way. They essentially go from it works to it stops working. It doesn't go like the latency is 1 second, now it becomes 2 seconds, and that's a little bit annoying. It's like latency is 1 second, and then it's 10 minutes. Okay, so there's a lot that goes into that, but I would just caution people, the finish line is not when you ship. That's really the starting line. You're going to have this product in market, you're connecting your customer in a new way, they're going to expect a certain experience, and do your homework, okay? I'm not going to tell you how to do that here, but in a conversation, we can certainly talk about that. But do your homework and make sure that the experience that you're expecting to deliver is going to happen when you've got a million things connected. I think people are short-shrifting that part of the equation right now.
Yeah, I think, at the end of the day, when you're a manufacturer and you're putting your product and your brand on the line, you want to make sure that you're picking a partner that has a respectable brand in the market, that has longevity, that has scale. I think, Kurt, you're exactly right. The reality is that scale is super important in terms of being able to make sure that platform provider can support that user experience to tens of millions of users. And at the end of the day, the commitment to the market. This market is not shaken out. There are a lot of new entrants in this marketplace, and you have to look at those players that have been in the consumer market for a long time and take a long, hard look as to whether or not that's whom you want to hitch your wagon to, because you know that they're committed to this market. The only sales pitch I'm going to give is that when you look at SmartThings and you look at Samsung, you know that we're going to be around. You know that we're going to scale out. You know that we're going to be global. We know that there's going to be a platform. And now it becomes a choice similar to the TV that you buy, the refrigerator that you buy, and other consumer and home electronics decisions that you make. And you have to make a decision as to whether or not you're going to go with a name brand like that, or you're going to go with something different.
I would add pretty much that I would agree with everything that Vince said. The only new piece of information I would add is you also have to keep in mind your own business models. So if you're a manufacturer, how are you going to go to market? Right? Do you want to be in a DIY space, or are you going to go and have somebody go to retail and purchase something off the shelf and go and have it work with that ecosystem? Or do you want some assistance from a service provider? Right? Do you want to be a part of an ecosystem and an app? If you define user experience, would you go to a marketplace within the app and say, hey, this works with me, right, and ship it to my house, and now all of a sudden, it's part of this ecosystem. Or even professional installs. So the service providers, they have the option of, they have the feet on the street that can help with an install, with a complicated install, right? And they may direct you to pick one, platform provider versus another, because I'm not sure, HomeKit is going to be able to do a professional install for something that's going to be compatible, and while, Xfinity or AT or someone else may be able to do an install.
I would sort of add one more honest recommendation to a manufacturer, I would say don't pick one, right? I mean, like one of the nice things is all the vendors up here are actually having success and potentially in slightly different markets. There are some protocols, although it's very confusing, something like Z-Wave, something like Zigbee, something like Wi-Fi, like those types of things have some commonalities. So I would look for the commonalities of the partners that you're interested in working with. And if you're a manufacturer, I mean, we look at our platforms, we have a lot of commonality of devices, right? We differentiate in different ways of how we enable those devices. But for the manufacturers, I think it's really important to have multiple go-to-market partners and possibilities. And I think they're really kind of depending on the product you make. There are really straightforward ways to do that, and as it gets more complex, you want to build a product in a way that's flexible. So think about maybe cloud to cloud would be the right approach if there's a lot of complexity in a product, because those integrations are easier than directly integrating a product into a back end.
Any questions from the audience? Sir?
Yeah, just want to link up what I picked up yesterday on the monetization of IoTs and the consistent roles of I see on the screen here for the 3 questions regarding partnerships. And I personally think partnerships is one of the key situations in the smartphone. For example, an insurer can be incentivized to provide higher NCDs at the end of the year for smart homes. Grocery supermarket will be willing to provide some kind of a free Christmas turkey if your home's your grocery supply is tied up with a delivery to the smart home service. So I just want to hear the panel's comment on the role of the partnership.
For those in the back who couldn't hear that, yesterday there was a panel on monetization of Internet of Things, and partnerships, the audience perspective, was extremely important for manufacturers to consider. Yet it scored relatively poorly in the last poll. So could you speak to the importance of partnerships in your business?
Yeah, and I think if I understand the question, they're thinking about, you mentioned insurance companies and
it's quite valid.
Yeah, so it's not partnerships in the sense that we would partner with a manufacturer, but auxiliary things. So we actually, I think, have seen a successful model with utilities who are actually driving a lot of the adoption of thermostats today. So a lot of them are giving them away for free, and I think that's a great example of kind of industry alignment. I do think there's a lot of opportunity for insurance companies because they can better manage their risk through the data that's coming out of the smart home. And so I think that will happen. I think right now we're so early in sort of evolution that I think consumer data privacy, what's the business model, all of those things are and I'm sure a lot of people on this panel are actively thinking and working on those things, but I think that it's more about what's the structure and is there an opportunity?
Yeah, what I can say is I know that on my team, I have a group of people that are just dedicated to go out and having those type of industry leading conversations and trying to figure out these models. And it does come down to the monetization. The reality is that there's a bit of margin stacking that exists in our market, and there's a question as to how much margin is available for everybody to participate in this ecosystem. So I think that there is an interest, and I think that the example of utility companies embracing this and giving away thermostats is a great data point. I think that insurance, you're exactly right, is right behind them in terms of wanting to adopt. It's interesting, insurance providers seem to be more interested in the data more than anything else. I think everybody is, but the insurance providers clearly feel like that can be dial moving in terms of their business. And so it becomes a very interesting and somewhat adjacent conversation around how do you deal with data on all of our platforms amongst all of those partners, some of which have competing interests for that data.
Other questions? Wow. Yes, sir.
So just to continue on your very last question that you put up, have you seen, which had to do with which one of the many partnerships do you go for? Have you seen products that come in many flavors? So let's say a Zigbee flavor, a Z-Wave flavor, a cloud flavor, and in your experience, is that
think at retail, that can be a very confusing experience for a consumer. I think through a services channel where you're selling one that you know works for the system going in, then that could be successful.
And I think it will continue to be confusing. Again, we're a service provider too, so people want a compatible, garage door opener. They're going to buy a garage door opener that's compatible with the system that the service that they've purchased. So there is no confusion there. But I think back to one of the original points, people aren't just going to retail today and buying a Wi-Fi connected garage door opener and saying, I know in California people who go to CES are doing this, but not the mass market consumers not saying, how do I connect this garage door opener to these light bulbs? They're just not doing that today. And so I think service providers in the short term solve that, and platform providers, because we kind of mask what's, you can look at your app and see what's compatible, but on longer term, I'm sure the diffusion will get, more as we standardize on the way things just, talk to each other.
Yeah. I think sort of one other interesting point that's sort of complementary to that is, up here we have some people who sell to retail, service providers, but ultimately we're all technology platforms, right? And then we have go-to-market partners, and so those things are, separated today. And so for me, when I look at the market, I get really excited about the kind of where those Venn diagrams overlap, right? Where we have a bunch of people who've gotten smart homes, but now they want to add something, right? And so I think that the future is when things get easy enough to just bring them in the home, plug them in, and have them work, is when we sort of cross the chasm and gotten to that mass market. We're not there yet, but that's where you start to think about as a manufacturer, what's the protocol, right? Because now you've got this system in the house, but then you want that person to be able to go online and file a light switch and install it and have it work and have it just kind of integrate. And so, I think that's where these sort of things start to overlap. I think that's really, really interesting.
But just to name names, I mean, our platform is protocol agnostic, and I suspect that's probably true of most of us. But if I had to make a bet, and I think some of you do have to make a bet, it's hard right now to bet against Bluetooth or BLE because it's in people's phones. That's super powerful, and it's hard to bet against Wi-Fi because most people have Wi-Fi in home, at least in the Western world. I think other technologies require gateways, and that adds a layer of complexity. I do agree with Ron's comment that gateway functionality will in the future be built into devices that call a gateway, so we have some other utility besides that. But I think if you really look forward at where the world is going, I think it's primarily going to be a BLE and Wi-Fi world.
That brings up sort of an interesting question. I think that's really, I think there's a lot of truth to that, but you probably won't sell a lot of those next year, right? So that's a dilemma for a manufacturer too, right? You want to go to market with what's here now, or are you building for the future? So you have to weigh those kind of time to market questions as well.
Yeah, I think the decision we've made is protocols are going to sort themselves out, right? The market will do that. I talked about it in my introduction, having a Works with Smart Things program. We developed a program because of user experience. That's it. Users don't want to think about protocols. They want to be able to see smart things, and then they want to look at the side of a box with their light bulb or their lock or whatever, and see that, and stamped on the side of that is a Works with Smart Things logo that ensures them that the platform that they bought has a set of devices, or the devices they're considering works with the platform that they bought. We don't think that in the long term that's going to be necessary, but certainly over the next couple of years, that's what we've decided to do, is to make sure that the end consumer that is building their own smart home platform and does not have a service provider that's doing that for them can walk in and see and identify and have the assurance that the devices that they are choosing not only work on the platform, but give them a seamless user experience.
So one of the questions I have, just in terms of the scenario you laid out, is that someone has a solution and then they start bringing in some of the many products that are being offered at the show floor. Managing the complexity as the breadth of products grows seems to be a challenge, right? You want to have a simple, very straightforward user experience, but to have such a strong breadth. How do you overcome this, or maintain that kind of simple user experience, given the potential breadth of issues that are increasing adoption?
You mean for like
absolutely. Yeah, the user perspective. So you're providing that very simple user interface.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things you do is you move a lot of it away from the interface, right? You've got voice control through Echo, which we do today. You've got integration in TV. You've got location days where things just happen automatically, so you can bring a device in the home. And I agree, as you put more and more devices into a single interface and I have to pull it up and press a button to do something, I think that experience starts to fall down. But as the house learns and turns lights automatically based on your pattern and adjusts your thermostats because it knows, when the door opens and if there's motion upstairs, I think what you see over time is sort of the value of the platform is the aggregation of all these interesting data points and then the application of algorithms to provide value back to the home. So you don't actually have to interact with all the devices to get a ton of value out of having them.
Yeah, I think you're right, Jay. The reality is that the single biggest challenge that the consumer has is having to use that app repeatedly to be able to control their home. We've tried to create very simple routines that do these things, but quite frankly, that's our single biggest challenge in our own app. Is there are so many devices and so many possibilities. How can you possibly expose that in a simple, easy-to-use way to a consumer? It's why we try to go in the direction of adding solution kits and very specific routines for consumers, because it's so much easier for them to digest versus having to get into an app and figure out and create their own routines.
Other questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
My question is about, I know most of you guys have a rip and replace solution. So you replace what we have and rip what we have, replace it. What choices do you provide to the consumer for retroactively making the thing smart? And what percentage is your manual replace?
I didn't understand. So
if you have old devices, like most of the homes here are still being built in the old way. Washer dryers, you have
what are the options for retrofitting existing products to make them smart?
So I can talk about one example that we have. I mean, we would like to leverage as much. I mean, sometimes that's just not possible, right? Sometimes devices are not, don't function properly anymore. They're clunkier than there's a lot of advantages of upgrading. But for instance, in home security, there's a lot of wired sensors and things that are already inside the house that people have invested a lot of money in keeping. And there are ways of making those smart. We do a lot of that today where we can take over some of those sensors and turn them into part of the connected home ecosystem and then expand on top of that. And again, I think it's one of the advantages the platform provider can offer is to come back, bring along some of the investments that you've made and integrate them into a bigger ecosystem of devices.
Yeah, I think we've seen, it's a really interesting point, and I think we actually have seen an effective thing. Anything that can be plugged in can be controlled, right, essentially. So we have these plugs, and then you think about washer dryers, you have modules that also measure kind of energy use, right? So now you can not only turn it on and off, but you can also do interesting things like when the dryer finishes, there's no more electricity running through it, send me an alert so I can come down and do it, or auto turn it on at a certain time. So I think that anything that can be plugged in can get basic control. And then there's some interesting things that a platform brings, like location-based automation, right? So when I leave at a certain time, turn something on or off. And you can apply that to any device that exists in the house already.
Smart products are adding intelligence through data analytics. So there's intelligence kind of happening at the edge, and as they're adding those value-added services, right APIs, we want to be able to leverage that. But that adds another, I would say, layer of complexity in terms of integration. How are you going to overcome that? How's that going to work out?
I mean, I think that from the service provider perspective, what you integrate is an interesting question, right? So at Alarm.com, our approach is we want the experience the user has to be exceptional, right? And so we're not of the approach where we integrate everything and anything, and here's the open API, and put it in and do whatever you want, right? We have a very open, and we integrate a lot of stuff, but in a managed way. And also, our core business goes through security, and so we have a responsibility for a life safety service that has to be reliable and secure and work, and that's applied across all our smart home products. So it is, I mean, that something that we spend a lot of time thinking about, and I don't think we have an easy answer for today.
From our perspective, the fine line there is you want it to be all the things that you mentioned, but you also want it to be able to be personal, right? Personalized for the end consumer. And so, like for instance, for us, we have ways, and we mentioned also, within your app, being able to add devices that maybe you have already in your house, right? They're important to people. Maybe you have a service app, right? And you can bring that into the ecosystem in a pretty seamless way and be a part of the ecosystem of devices and the value that you're getting from your home security solution. So I think there are ways to do it, but we also struggle with the same, you can connect to Coke can. We're not going to take that on anytime soon. We just don't think that's mass market enough. And I think that sometimes it can do more damage than good in the simplification and the value proposition.
I mean, the other sort of interesting thing from the platform perspective is with, we're in millions of homes with, millions more users. We actually get feedback on what people actually want in their home and what they like to add, so that helps direct us as well. Questions, please?
So, what service providers such as contractor or developer, what role do you think they should take, and any existing problem or any potential challenges that we should be aware of, or contractor or developer service provider?
I'm not sure about that. Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah, so for the service provider such as contractor or developer who want to deliver the smart home, what challenges do you think they should be aware of? Or do you know any existing problems they should be aware of?
So you're saying if you want to build a platform, if you want to become a service provider, I say it's really hard. I would find a good partner to no, I mean, quite frankly, it's hard, right? And there are a lot of challenges. And so, at a basic level, reliability would be one that would be like the first area of focus, because I think that's where a lot of people struggle.
Yes, sir.
Interesting to hear your perspective on smart homes or home integration systems outside of the U.S. Is there anything in Japan that you see, you're like, that would work in this market, or European operators? That we've seen we have operators around the world, and we see some evolution, but we'll get to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's got some. So we're in a number of different countries: Mexico, Central America, Brazil, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Turkey. We have a partnership where we're working in Europe. And I think what we've seen is adoption of smart home technology is still farther along in the U.S. than internationally. I don't know about the Japanese market. And what you end up seeing is the use cases are just a little different culturally, right? Not everyone has the same attention to HVAC systems, so they might not need a thermostat. Or, video is much more important in Mexico than it is in other markets. And so I think what you end up seeing is, and that's like the really cool thing about all this technology, is we talk about it as a category, but once you get down to the individual home, they all look a little different. And every market looks a little different. And then there's all this difference. Z-Wave in the US is different than Z-Wave in other markets, and so all those things kind of add complexity. But to answer your question, I think we see really increasing interest and demand internationally that is starting to look like the US a few years ago.
And we also see the same thing, but I think the interesting thing is we haven't seen really any new use cases. Like they're all the same kind of use cases, but maybe they're prioritized slightly differently. We see energy management a little bit more important here in California, like you mentioned, video more important in Mexico. So roughly the same use cases, but just a different priority of things, and maybe using some of the messaging slightly differently. But what we still see is peace of mind, whether again it's monitoring security or it's some other derivative of that. Peace of mind is still the thing that's the most important thing, whether it's through video or it's through store locks or it's through something like that. That's still the resonating message.
Yeah. And then not only the privacy, but also the issue of the peace of mind, the issue of privacy in European countries. You want to be sure that you can run the platform inside the country and keep the data of the consumers inside the country. That's a very strong sentiment.
Marcus, that's going to have to be the last word. We're out of time. Please join me in thanking the panel for